There's a line from George Orwell's book, 1984, which is, "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command." Well, our eyes and ears are about to become a lot more unreliable as generative AI content becomes hyper-realistic. You'll have seen in the space of just a few months how we've already gone from blurry images of people with 3 arms to much better tools that can convincingly mimic anyone's voice or appearance. This means soon, within seconds, all of us will be able to create AI media that consistently passes the Turing test. In other words, we cannot reliably tell the difference between AI versus human-generated content. Now, we already know history is riddled with examples of manipulated images and fabricated narratives. These famous photos of Joseph Stalin to remove those who fell out of favor. However, the AI era feels distinctly different. The sheer scale, accessibility, and realism of these synthetic creations have the potential to erode trust, distort truth, and some would argue even destabilize whole societies. For a sense of the pace and scale, look at the summary of the percentage rise in AI deepfake fraud in just the last year. There's been an increase in over 2,000% in some countries. So, how will you adapt in this new world where you may need to question every single piece of content you read or watch, including this one? Are there any ways for you not to be fooled? Well, in this video, we'll try and figure out how, if at all, we may be able to distinguish fact from fiction so that you can protect yourself. If you're new here, welcome to Futureflect. The world is changing really fast and it's easy to feel overwhelmed. But here, we calmly reflect on the future together, empowering us to not just survive, but thrive in this world of change. Now, one of the first thoughts you may have is, do I need to really bother with this, or will government regulations and the legal system just sort of figure it out and protect us from having to deal with it, so that I don't have to see any AI deepfakes that could be harmful to society? There are some early signals of legal systems responding. In the US, several states are considering or have already passed legislation concerning deepfakes. In New York, individuals are not able to have their likeness used in synthetic media without their consent. Interestingly, in China, which has no amendment protecting free speech, they've also put in some deepfake regulations. And if AI is not marked in a prominent manner, it's considered a public offense. Now, we could list laws endlessly, but I'm skeptical there'll be enough. After all, the legal system might pick up the most egregious or harmful cases, but with the sheer volume of AI-generated media, trying to expect them to investigate every fake video or image is just unrealistic. And by the way, just as a reminder of the sheer volume of media, even today, a video uploading platform like YouTube has more than 500 hours of videos uploaded every minute. And that's now, before Gen AI tools start to make media creation even cheaper and easier. So let's assume laws for individuals might not be sufficient. What laws may then apply to those who provide the technology? Does AI pose the solution to AI? The tech industry is thinking through this problem quite deeply, as most companies do want to approach this responsibly. And this sort of sits under a key idea which pops up in different ways, which is AI watermarking and detection. So AI watermarking refers to a family of different techniques that can be used to embed a hidden identifier into a digital file. And this identifier can then be used to convey additional information, so that you can track the origin of the file, verify its authenticity, and so on. For example, there's an organization called the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, quite sort of a mouthful, but it's C2PA, which is trying to work on some open standards around better tracing. When I went and sort of did more research into watermarking, I came across this really interesting study, which sort of thought through how different watermarking systems would be scored on different technical or policy dimensions. So, for example, would a particular watermarking system be universal and work on any content, or only content generated by a particular company? Now, what becomes apparent from these scores is that no watermark system may be foolproof. Yes, they will be useful for a lot of the things uploaded, particularly on the big tech platforms, where many of these companies can and will put in place appropriate safeguards. But the study is about how a motivated individual may be able to evade AI detection tools or use one of the many open source models that may not have watermarking. So it possibly becomes a game of cat and mouse, and watermarking may not be the single golden solution. So if that's not the golden solution, are there any others? I started to dig around in history to see where trust-based systems, have humans invented others in the past, and is there anything we can learn from them? This slide outlines a few, So this could include central banks regulating the money supply, or using third-party verification, like employing an auditor. Or we've even invented things like certification programs, so say Rainforest Alliance or the USDA Organic, verifying that products are produced without synthetic fertilizers and pesticides. We've also invented things like reputation systems, where you can use reviews or things like credit scores, so maybe people get given trust scores based on how reliable you've proven to be in the past. Though I may try and mess with any trust score algorithm by describing myself as reliably unreliable. Anyway, there's also credentialing systems. So institutions like universities and professional bodies, they issue degrees and certifications that signal a person's expertise or qualifications. Now, perhaps with some creativity, a blend of those things could be helpful and adapted to the problem of deepfake AI content. But again, I'm a bit skeptical here. As you'll notice, so many of those systems rely on government institutions in some shape or form, orchestrating, regulating, or certifying things. And it seems our faith in institution is probably at one of the lowest points in history at the moment. Every year, a PR firm called Edelman produces a report which looks at trusted institutions. And look at these findings. 61% of respondents trust businesses more than institutions, and only 51% claim to trust governments. They found that there is a glaring gap between the trust that consumers have in companies, which is 30%, and the trust that business leaders think consumers have in their organization, which is 87%. In short, we are becoming increasingly skeptical of the power and motives of large corporations. So, if we're thinking that strong institutions are part of the answer, we've got to find some way to rebuild our collective faith in them. There is one quick win that governments can do, which is start to over-communicate with each other. During the Cold War, the US and the Soviet Union established a direct communication line, it was known as the iconic red phone, to prevent misunderstandings from escalating into nuclear war. Although there is some dispute over whether the red phone actually ever existed. But in any case, we may want a lot more of this. Think of the potential scenarios, not just election interference, which is more well published, but imagine a deepfake of a well-known American general burning a copy of a religious text, or a deepfake of a president saying that they've launched an attack against another nation. That's a scenario where you definitely want access to a red phone, and fast. And so in a world flooded with AI-generated misinformation, as taxpayers, we may want to insist on money going into foreign services, diplomatic channels, and embassies, so that they have this extra capacity to over-communicate as a vital tool for de-escalation and conflict prevention. And I have an even bigger question, which is how will institutions even start to cope with the truth, let alone the lies? Now, what do I mean by this? Well, of all the potential risks out there, one of the most interesting ones is called the liar's dividend. And this refers to the phenomenon where the very existence of deepfakes allows someone to claim that the real content is actually fake, so they can just dismiss real evidence or accusations as fake. And we've already actually seen that happen with a couple of prominent politicians. The most profound impact of the liar's dividend is the potential to erode public trust in media and information sources. If people start to believe that any piece of evidence could be fake, it becomes increasingly difficult to hold anyone accountable or to agree on a shared reality. This can lead to greater societal division and a breakdown in the rule of law. The liar's dividend also presents significant challenges for the legal systems. Think about courts. They rely on evidence to determine the truth. But if that evidence can be easily dismissed as fake, it really complicates the process of justice. And similarly, journalists and investigators may face hurdles in ensuring that their work is taken seriously. I'm tempted to make another video on just what the court systems will do, as picture and video evidence has become a big feature of the legal system as it stands. Let me know in the comments if that would be of interest. Okay, let's take a breath. Is there anything you can or would start doing on a personal level to protect yourself? Well, this is Futureflect, so let me start with one of the more extreme ideas I came across about what the future may look like in the next 10 or 15 years, which is this idea of immutable life logs in the cloud. Basically, think the Truman Show on steroids. So imagine you as an individual will have a consent log. So from geolocation tagging to videos all the time of what you're doing, sort of like an automated life trail. So that if something then comes out about you that was false, you could then refer people to the log and prove it wasn't you. Now, I found that to be a really interesting idea, as privacy may become less about hiding things and instead proving about what you're doing. This could change how we think about ourselves and humanity, so it is something for you to ponder. But let's put that aside for now. What about the shorter term? Well, one practical thing to make sure you don't get scammed is to probably sit down with the family and agree that on any calls, if something feels suspicious, you give each other permission to ask a few questions that only the other person would know, to truly verify the identity of the other person. In fact, this was the exact technique the CEO of Ferrari had to use recently when someone called up pretending to be his director with the exact right voice. He got suspicious and asked, "What was the book you recommended I read a couple of days ago?" And the scammer hung up. And you don't need to be a prominent person to be at risk. It's becoming increasingly easy for anyone to clone your voice now, even by calling you up and pretending it was a missed number or finding something you did on social media. The other thing you're going to need to do is to adopt the mindset and approach of a skeptical journalist, and we need to collectively increase our media literacy. Some experts have talked about a framework called SIFT, S-I-F-T, which was developed by an academic called Mike Caulfield. So S stands for stop before you're emotionally triggered. Just think if something seems outrageous or even too good to be true, check yourself first. Then I, which stands for investigate the source. Who shared this? Is it someone I trust or is it just a random source? Then F, find alternative coverage. Did someone else already write about it? And then T, trace the original. Though admittedly, this is going to be much harder now and in the future. You may need to start to assume that it's synthetic first, unless and until you have compelling reason to believe otherwise. One particular watch out is what we're already seeing, which is sort of fake public comments generated by AI bots, as it will soon be impossible to spot text fakes. So don't allow yourself to be glib about accepting anything you see on social media, no matter how many people may be saying it, unless the AI comment happens to be this, in which case it's entirely true and you should do a thumbs up. I'll be honest, of all the topics I've explored, this one leaves me feeling the most uncertain about the future. Definitive solutions feel elusive, and we're going to have to figure this out as we go. And I do have faith that we'll figure it out. Humans have this amazing capacity to do that. But I think it's going to come with some turbulence for the next few years as we develop new robust systems to preserve trust. I'm sure it's a topic we'll probably revisit again, given the pace at which it's evolving. But for now, we stay vigilant. And since I began with an Orwell quote, let me end with another Orwell quote, which is this: "In a time of universal deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. So, in a world where AI can craft convincing illusions, fighting for the truth becomes an act of defiance." And so my ask of you as you head into the future is this: will you be a revolutionary? Will you seek the truth even when it's obscured by layers of AI-generated deception? At least during this transition period, finding out the truth may not be something you can just outsource to someone else. And even if we are occasionally deceived, which will be understandable, then you should stay open to revising your opinion when you realize you may have been duped. Don't let your ego get in the way. Remember, strong opinions, loosely held. And I guess it's somewhat fitting that in this world of artificial intelligence, the biggest asset you have to protect yourself is your own human intelligence. Make sure you use it. Now, let me know in the comments how you plan to navigate this new AI media landscape. What strategies might you have to discern truth from fiction? Thanks for watching Futureflect, and as always, stay curious to stay ahead.